After it was over between Julian Thorne and me, I ended up with his uncle. It wasn't until after I married Julian Thorne that I realized he'd only married me for appearances. The person he truly loved was his stepmother, Serafina Rivers. After he abandoned me yet again for Serafina, I finally decided to divorce him. But later, he called me in the dead of night. "Melody, I miss you so much. Can you come back and be with me?" A man behind me chuckled softly. "So disrespectful. Is that any way to talk to your aunt?" Chapter 1. Julian Thorne, if you leave me again this time, we're finished. Hearing this, Julian paused for a moment. Just as my heart leaped with hope at his hesitation, he immediately got into the car waiting by the roadside without a second thought. "Don't be difficult." That was the last thing he said to me before leaving, but was I really being difficult? He was the one who promised to make up for our honeymoon, the one who said he'd put everything aside this time to be with me, the one who abandoned me on the street in a foreign country. How could it be me being difficult? A sarcastic smile touched my lips. "Melody Ashford, oh, Melody Ashford, you should have known better. No matter what, you could never compete with Serafina Rivers. You couldn't compete with the woman Julian had obsessed over for years, only for her to end up becoming his stepmother." Chapter 2. It was only after marrying Julian Thorne that I learned he'd married me purely for appearances. The one he truly loved was, nominally, his stepmother. I had heard some rumors about him and Serafina. The most undeniable incident was probably at his father and Serafina's wedding, where he flipped the dining table, injured his father, and furiously threatened to cut ties with him. But he told me he'd acted so impulsively because he was angry that his father had remarried just over a month after his mother's death, and to a woman not much older than himself. What did I do then? I smiled and told him, "Of course I believe you." And then he suddenly pulled out a ring and proposed. I was a bit stunned at the time. My mind went blank, like fireworks exploding, until he nervously called my name several times, pulling me back from my daze. Looking at the man before me, his expression anxious, his eyes fervent, I suddenly felt a lump in my throat. The scene I had fantasized about countless times was unfolding right before me. I couldn't refuse, but I never expected that the happy life I envisioned would reveal its ridiculous and absurd side on the very first day of our marriage. Chapter 3. If I hadn't experienced it myself, I wouldn't have known how exhausting being a bride could be. But thinking that the man I was marrying was Julian Thorne, even the exhaustion felt sweet. However, during the wedding ceremony, Julian seemed distracted. Even his smile looked forced. I thought he was just overtired. After all, he had handled every detail of the wedding preparation himself. So when his group of friends started teasingly trying to get him drunk, I smiled and took the drinks for him. Only later did I find out his behavior was because of Serafina, because Serafina hadn't come. Therefore, this wedding, which he had meticulously planned according to the fantasy wedding scenario they envisioned when they were in love, lost its original meaning. That night, sitting on the edge of the bed, I was very nervous. Julian and I had skipped the dating phase and gone straight into marriage, and before him, I hadn't even had a boyfriend. Julian probably noticed my nervousness and smiled, reaching out to ruffle my hair. "Don't be afraid." But just as his kiss was about to land, his phone suddenly rang. Although Julian glanced at it and hung up, the person on the other end was persistent. I had no choice but to gently push him away and tell him to answer the phone first. After taking the call, Julian's face showed a panic I'd never seen before. He dropped a hasty, "Something urgent came up, you go ahead and sleep," and rushed out of the house. Because he had been drinking and looked extremely anxious, I worried something might happen to him, so I asked the driver for the address and followed him. As soon as I arrived, I saw Julian anxiously carrying Serafina out of a bar. This was Julian's explanation for the incident. He said he and Serafina had indeed dated, and that's why the bartender called him when Serafina got drunk. As for why his number was still listed as her emergency contact, he claimed he didn't know. "Melody, since I chose to marry you, it proves I've moved on from the past. You have to trust me." He said this with a serious expression and sincere eyes, his righteous demeanor making it impossible for me not to believe him. But how could I forget? If he had truly moved on, why would he abandon his new wife on their wedding night? I suppose I'd been kidding myself all along. Chapter 4. Snapping back from my memories, I realized it had started raining at some point. Worse than getting soaked was that I was lost. Looking at the unfamiliar surroundings and the few scattered passersby, I felt a surge of fear and instinctively pulled out my phone to call Julian. But the call went unanswered. I gave a wry, helpless smile. Maybe Julian was already on the flight back home, or maybe he just didn't want to argue with me again. But all I wanted was to ask him the name of the hotel we were staying at. Julian had put a lot of effort into this honeymoon trip. He arranged everything from the hotel booking to the itinerary. He said all I needed to do was be happy and leave the rest to him. But he probably didn't expect Serafina to get drunk and fall down the stairs on the first day of the trip. Nor did he remember to tell me the name of our hotel in his rush to leave. Sighing at the thought, I realized I shouldn't have listened to Julian and left everything to him. Now all our luggage had been sent to the hotel, and I didn't even know where it was. I sent him another message, but after waiting a while, it was still like dropping a stone into the ocean, no response. Seeing the rain coming down harder, I decided to find a place to stay nearby. But I hadn't walked more than a few steps when I ran into several drunks. I tried to walk around them, but one of them grabbed my arm. They spoke a language I didn't understand, their lecherous grins terrifying me. I struggled hard but couldn't break free. My struggles only seemed to excite them more, and the other men started laughing and grabbing at me too. I felt utterly desperate, unable to even cry for help. Just then, a playfully defiant male voice came from behind me. "What kind of men pick on a girl? If you've got guts, come at me." My heart, which had been lodged in my throat, dropped back into place. I turned my head, and upon seeing the man's face, my eyes widened in shock. Uncle, Chapter 5. Julian had a younger paternal uncle, Sebastian Sterling, though Sebastian was actually 2 years older than Julian. I had seen him once from afar at our wedding. At the time, Julian had told me with a look of disgust to stay away from him. Julian had told me a bit about Sebastian's background. Essentially, Sebastian's birth was a scheme. His mother got pregnant behind Mr. Thorne S.R.'s back and raised him, eventually threatening suicide to force Mr. Thorne S.R. to accept him. Because of this, everyone in the Thorne family considered Sebastian a stain on their name, so they didn't even change his last name back to Thorne. Sebastian, however, didn't seem to care at all, constantly causing trouble that would infuriate Mr. Thorne S.R. I heard he had recently angered the old man again and was currently confined as punishment. Seeing Sebastian here was surprising enough, but what astonished me more was that he was a skilled fighter. He took on those thugs single-handedly and more than held his own. After dealing with them, he barely seemed injured. He nonchalantly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and turned to me. "Where are you going? I'll take you. Your injury. It's nothing." Being overly polite in this situation felt insincere, so after thanking him, I told him I needed to find a place to stay. A flicker of confusion crossed Sebastian's face, but he tactfully didn't ask anything. "Coincidentally, I'm here on a business trip for a few days too. Why don't you stay at my hotel? It's not safe for a young woman traveling alone. If anything else happens, you can find me." After what had just happened, I desperately wanted someone nearby. So, after Sebastian finished speaking, I nodded eagerly. Soon we arrived at Sebastian's hotel, but awkwardly it was peak tourist season, and the hotel had no vacant rooms. As I was debating what to do, Sebastian spoke up. "If you don't mind, you can make do in my room for one night. I have the presidential suite. It has 2 bedrooms, so it won't be an issue." Looking at the increasingly heavy rain and the dark night outside, I nodded. "Thank you, Uncle. That's very kind of you." After showing me to my room, he left, saying he had work matters to attend to and that I should rest well. Before leaving, as if suddenly remembering something, he went into his bedroom and came out moments later, handing me a brand new bathrobe. "Just bought it, still sealed. You can take a bath after I leave. You got caught in the rain, be careful not to catch a cold." After saying this, Sebastian closed the door and left. Clutching the bathrobe he gave me, I suddenly burst into tears. The warmth I received from a stranger I'd only met once was more than what my own husband had ever shown me. I didn't know whether to feel tragic or laughable. I don't know how long I cried, perhaps trying to vent all the grievances I had suffered that day, or even recently. By the time I composed myself and sank into the bathtub filled with hot water, as the warmth enveloped me bit by bit, only one thought remained in my mind. This man, Julian Thorne, I was done with him. This man I had once hoped to win over with my whole heart, I didn't want him anymore. Chapter 6. Julian's reply finally arrived the next afternoon. Looking at the cold, stiff string of letters on my phone screen, the hotel name, I suddenly found it somewhat amusing. He didn't even include a single word of concern, yet surprisingly, I didn't feel sad. After thanking Sebastian again, I went to the hotel Julian had booked. As soon as I pushed open the door, I saw the bed covered in roses and, in the center, 2 swans with intertwined necks. Previously, I would have been moved to tears, but now it was just an eyesore. Loving someone is never just about appearances. I couldn't believe he didn't understand that. I called room service to remove all the offending items, then lay down on the bed and fell asleep. I had decided, traveling alone wasn't bad at all. Right now, I needed to recharge my batteries and then enjoy this vacation properly. However, fate had other plans. I developed a fever. I woke up in the middle of my sleep feeling freezing cold, and piling all the blankets on top of me did nothing to help. Drowsily, my phone suddenly rang. I didn't even register what the person on the other end said before falling back asleep. When I opened my eyes again, I was surprised to find Sebastian somehow in my room, asleep on the sofa opposite me. Looking at the glass of water and fever medicine on the bedside table, my muddled thoughts slowly cleared. That call last night was from Sebastian. On the phone, Sebastian had asked if I wanted to have dinner together. I mumbled drowsily, "Don't feel well, not eating," and hung up. I don't know how he convinced the hotel staff to open my door, only that he had been taking care of me ever since. "Awake!" Sebastian's sudden voice startled me. He stood up, walked over to my side, and placed his hand on my forehead. "Doesn't feel hot anymore. Let's check your temperature again." Perhaps sick people are more sentimental. Looking at the thermometer Sebastian handed me, I suddenly felt like crying again. He probably noticed my unusual state and said with a light laugh, "I just like to help people out when I see injustice. Don't feel obligated." Chapter 7. That fever came on strong but passed quickly. I was fever-free by the end of the day, though still weak. Consequently, my planned sightseeing was completely derailed, and I ended up burdening Sebastian, who took care of me for several days. On the day of our return flight, I woke up early specifically to say goodbye to Sebastian, but just as I stepped out of the hotel, I received a message from him. "I don't like goodbyes, so let's just say farewell like this." Reading Sebastian's message, a small smile unconsciously formed on my lips. I hadn't expected someone who seemed so carefree to have a sentimental side. However, I didn't expect that the person I had just said goodbye to that morning would reappear so soon. I actually ran into Sebastian, pulling his suitcase, at the boarding gate. Seeing my surprised expression, Sebastian grinned mischievously. "Surprise, bet you didn't expect this. Now you won't be bored on the way back." As he said, the somewhat tedious journey home became much more bearable with his company. It felt like only a moment had passed before I was back on familiar ground. What I hadn't expected was for Julian to be there to pick me up, holding a large bouquet of roses. Seeing this jarring sight, the smile that had been on my face instantly vanished. Julian walked towards me with the roses. Just as he was about to speak, he caught sight of Sebastian standing beside me. His eyes, which had been full of smiles moments before, instantly filled with ice. "Why are you with this bastard?" Julian's voice wasn't quiet, and nearby travelers were already casting curious glances at Sebastian. Sebastian raised an eyebrow, seemingly unfazed, but I immediately felt the blood rush to my head. "Julian Thorne, he's still your uncle, however you slice it. Is that any way to address an elder?" The anger on Julian's face was instantly replaced by confusion. He looked at me incredulously. "Melody, are you arguing with me because of an outsider?" "Outsider?" I laughed. I'd almost forgotten, thanks for the reminder. Seeing me laugh, Julian thought my attitude had softened and reached out to take my hand, but I stepped back quickly. "Actually, I'm an outsider to you now too." Julian's brow furrowed, and he looked at me with confusion. "Melody, what do you mean by that?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, word by word, "I mean, we're finished. The moment you abandoned me and turned away, we were already over." Chapter 8. Hearing my words, Julian laughed instead of getting angry, but his smile was full of sarcasm. "It was just a trip, wasn't it? Why make such a big deal out of it?" Perhaps sensing the coldness in my eyes, Julian's brow furrowed slightly. Although he still tried to explain patiently, the impatience in his eyes was undeniable. "Didn't I tell you already? There's nothing going on between Serafina and me. Can you stop overthinking things?" Looking at the self-righteous Julian before me, I found it laughable. Nothing going on, did he believe that himself? But whether there was or wasn't no longer mattered. I didn't care anymore. I didn't want to argue with him. Just as I was about to turn and leave, Sebastian, who was standing behind me, suddenly spoke up, his voice carrying its usual playful defiance. "Nephew, you should really thank Melody for her good temper. With that attitude of yours, anyone else would have slapped you silly by now." Julian's face instantly darkened like ink. He looked at Sebastian and said menacingly, "None of your business. Just upholding family decency. Wouldn't want a scandalous affair between a stepson and his stepmother hitting the news someday. Bad for my business." As soon as Sebastian finished speaking, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Seeing Julian getting increasingly agitated, Sebastian quickly pulled me away from the airport. Behind us, Julian's furious shouts reached my ears. "Sebastian Sterling, mind your own damn business. Melody Ashford, don't you dare regret this." Of course, I wouldn't regret it. I couldn't wait to draw a clear line between us. Chapter 9. The divorce from Julian went smoothly. When I handed him the divorce papers, he signed them without even lifting an eyelid. The day I got the divorce certificate, my best friend Chloe was happier than I was. She drove her flashy sports car to pick me up right outside City Hall. Seeing me walk out, she immediately ran up and hugged me, then, like pulling a rabbit out of a hat, produced a bouquet of flowers from behind her back. "Congratulations, Mel, on escaping the nightmare." I smiled and accepted the flowers. Just as I was about to leave with Chloe, Julian's sarcastic voice came from behind. "Melody Ashford, don't you come crying back begging me later." Chloe was about to turn around and curse him out, but I reached out and stopped her. "Forget it," I heard myself say. Not because I felt lingering attachment, but because it felt unnecessary. He was just a stranger now. Why waste my breath on him? Chapter 10. 2 months after the divorce, Chloe suddenly said she wanted to introduce me to someone. Perhaps sensing my reluctance, Chloe, who was usually playful, adopted a serious expression. "Mel, don't let one failed relationship scare you away from embracing a new life. You're wonderful. That jerk didn't deserve you. You're beautiful, you come from money, you're kind, and good-tempered. You have no idea how many people asked for your contact info when they heard you were divorced." Looking into Chloe's earnest eyes, the dark cloud that had been hanging over my heart seemed to instantly dissipate. Yes, I was never the one at fault. Why should I let that relationship hold me back? So I readily agreed to Chloe's arrangement. But I never imagined that the first blind date Chloe arranged for me would be with Sebastian Sterling. Chapter 11. Wearing the chic new dress Chloe had given me, looking at Sebastian sitting opposite me with a smile playing on his lips, I instantly felt like I was sitting on pins and needles. "Uncle," I stammered, then immediately felt the title wasn't quite appropriate, considering I was already divorced from Julian. Sebastian evidently guessed my thoughts and said with a light laugh, "Just call me Sebastian." At that moment, I could never have imagined that one day Sebastian would pin me down in bed, repeatedly forcing me to call him uncle. The atmosphere became slightly awkward. I gathered my thoughts for a moment before speaking, but unexpectedly, Sebastian spoke at the same time, and 2 distinctly different voices sounded simultaneously. "You don't have to take this seriously. I'm very happy the blind date is you." I looked up at Sebastian. Uncharacteristically, a blush tinged his face. He cleared his throat lightly before continuing. "I know you have reservations. It's okay, we can give it a try. Instead of going on a blind date with a complete stranger, at least we know each other, and we got along quite well, didn't we?" I knew I should shake my head and refuse. Given his relationship with Julian, keeping my distance would be the wisest choice. But looking into his clear eyes and at his smiling lips, as if possessed, I nodded. "Let's give it a try then." At least Sebastian seemed much more reliable than Julian. Chapter 12. Julian felt something was very off with him lately. More precisely, he'd felt strange ever since divorcing Melody. He once thought his marriage to Melody was merely a tool to spite Serafina. But when Melody turned and left without hesitation, he felt like a huge piece of his heart had suddenly gone empty. Initially, he thought it was just habit, After all, they had lived together day and night for 2 years. If you counted the time they knew each other, it was even longer. But that day, after drinking too much at a business dinner, lying in bed with a splitting headache, he suddenly thought of Melody again. If Melody were here, she would surely grumble about him neglecting his health for business while preparing him a soothing hangover broth. After feeding it to him, she would tirelessly massage his temples. He had never told her how much he enjoyed lying with his head in her lap while she massaged him. Her hands were warm and soft, the pressure on his forehead just right, making him feel very comfortable. Occasionally, the thought would cross his mind that living like this with Melody forever wouldn't be so bad. But the thought lasted only a moment because he knew he still couldn't let go of Serafina. He met Serafina in college. At that time, he had quarreled with his family and his allowance was cut off. Refusing to bow down, he went out to work part-time. Raised in comfort his whole life, earning money on his own for the first time was incredibly tough, needless to say. Serafina was 2 years ahead of him and also worked there because her family wasn't well off. She helped him out when people were giving him a hard time. One thing led to another, and they started dating. Later, his mother found out about them. He didn't know what his mother said to Serafina, but after that, Serafina broke up with him and vanished without a trace. He thought their connection ended there, but unexpectedly, the next time they met, she had become his stepmother. At that moment, he felt the blood rush to his head and couldn't stop himself from causing a scene at the wedding. It was Serafina, her eyes red, questioning him, "Are you trying to get me killed?" That snapped him back to reality. After that, out of spite, he proposed to Melody. Why Melody? Of course, because he knew she liked him. On their wedding night, he still went to find the drunken Serafina. It was that night he learned why she had left without a word and why she became his stepmother. Because someone had forced himself on her at her part-time job, and that person turned out to be his own father. His mother used this as leverage to force her to break up with him. And after his mother passed away, his father forced Serafina to marry him. He remembered that night, Serafina crying incessantly, her eyes red, finally screaming hoarsely. "Do I owe your family something? Why do you both bully me? Why can't I have the one I love while you get the beautiful wife and a happy life?" At that moment, his heart shattered. He felt deeply indebted to Serafina, so whenever anything happened to her, he would rush to her side immediately. As for Melody, she loved him so much, she would forgive him, right? But he forgot, love can come and love can go. Even the warmest heart will grow cold if it never receives a response. He suddenly remembered his childhood, Melody following him around, softly calling him Big Brother. He also remembered their wedding day, her reddened ears and trembling body when he was about to kiss her. He suddenly felt a strong urge to call her. He acted on this impulse, dialing the number he knew by heart. The moment the dialing tone sounded, he breathed a sigh of relief. Melody hadn't blocked him. Maybe this proved she still had feelings for him. He even thought, maybe if he coaxed her a bit, softened his stance, apologized, Melody would come back. The call finally connected. He finally said the words he had wanted to say for so long but hadn't. "Melody, I miss you so much. Can you come back and be with me?" But before he could say more, a soft chuckle came from the other end, followed by that familiar yet infuriating voice. "So disrespectful. Is that any way to talk to your aunt?" Chapter 13. I had expected to run into Julian again, but not under these circumstances. The night before, Sebastian had been a bit wild, so I'd punished him by sending him out to buy pastries from that bakery I love, the one that always has a long line. So when the doorbell rang, I assumed it was Sebastian forgetting his keys again. Grumbling, I casually threw on a robe and went to open the door, but I never expected to see Julian standing there. He looked like he hadn't slept all night, his eyes were bloodshot, with dark circles underneath, and his lips were pale and bloodless. He looked like he might collapse on my doorstep any second. I didn't know why he had suddenly shown up, but I firmly believed that a good ex is like a dead ex. So I stood blocking the doorway and asked expressionlessly, "What are you doing here?" Julian stared at me without blinking for a long time. Then, noticing the robe I was wearing, his eyes suddenly reddened. Following his gaze, I realized I was wearing Sebastian's robe. "Melody, do you really not want me anymore?" Julian spoke, and his question instantly made me laugh. It had been so long since the divorce, and now he shows up like this. Was he trying to tell me he now realized he loved me? Perhaps the mockery on my face was too obvious because Julian's expression shifted, but he still pleaded humbly. Melody, please give me one more chance, okay? We still have so much time ahead of us. I can spend the rest of my life making up for the mistakes I've made. No need. Sebastian's voice suddenly cut in. I looked up to see him leaning casually against the wall, holding several bags of breakfast, a smile playing on his lips as he looked at me. Mel, next time you're in danger, you should call your boyfriend for help. Your boyfriend isn't just for show, you know. I don't know which of Sebastian's words struck a nerve with Julian, but his expression suddenly turned dark as he spoke. Sebastian Sterling, you've had designs on Melody for a long time, haven't you? Otherwise, how could you have, coincidentally, shown up by Melody's side right after I flew back home during that trip? Hearing this, Sebastian didn't panic at all, still wearing that playfully defiant expression, but his eyes held a new sharpness. That's right. I gave you a chance, but you didn't take it. I originally intended to respect Mel's wishes, but you let her fall into danger. So, I had no choice but to step in myself to cherish the woman I love. Chapter 14. I didn't quite catch everything else they said afterwards. Sebastian's words kept echoing in my mind. It wasn't until Sebastian closed the door and pulled me down onto the sofa that I slowly came back from my daze. Too bad about those pastries I queued so long for. They definitely won't taste as good now. Just as Sebastian was about to get up, I reached out and grabbed his arm. Isn't there something you want to tell me? Of course there is. But you need to eat first. I'd worry if you got too hungry. Since we started dating, Sebastian had said things like this often. Before, I just thought he was prone to sweet talk, but now I felt it was an expression of his affection. Meeting my gaze, Sebastian sighed. All right, I'll tell you everything. Only then did I learn that his sudden appearance during that trip wasn't a coincidence. He had been actively looking for me. He really was in that area on a business trip, but he had planned to fly back home the day we arrived. Unexpectedly, he saw a hurried-looking Julian at the airport. He found it strange. Having just seen my social media post about being on vacation, why was Julian returning so soon? He was in the same departure lounge as Julian. Julian didn't notice him, but he overheard Julian's phone call and realized he was rushing back to see Serafina. Sebastian said he felt furious at that moment, wanting nothing more than to punch Julian right then and there. But he was worried about me being alone, abroad, and potentially in danger, so he immediately headed towards the location I had posted about. He tried calling me on the way, but unfortunately, his phone died. So he had to search aimlessly around the area I mentioned in my post, asking people as he went. Sebastian paused here, his expression a mixture of lingering fear and profound relief. Thank God I found the right place, and thank God I got there in time. Before Sebastian could finish, tears streamed down my face. I buried my face in his chest, sobbing and gasping for breath. He gently stroked my back and sighed. I didn't want to tell you because I was afraid you'd cry. What matters is that we're okay now, right? I nodded against his chest. Once I finally calmed down, a new question arose. But why? We didn't really know each other back then. I watched Sebastian's ears turn red little by little, seeing a shy expression on his face for the first time. He cleared his throat lightly before continuing. No, we had met before, shortly after I first came back to the Thorne household. Chapter 15. Sebastian's words took me back to the distant past. Only then did I remember that we had indeed met. But back then, he was just an adolescent boy. Maybe 14 or 15, incredibly thin due to long-term malnutrition, bearing no resemblance to the dashing man he was now. And because so much time had passed, I had completely forgotten about it. I never thought he would remember it for so many years. That day, I happened to be visiting Julian. As I walked into the courtyard, I saw several boys bullying someone, cursing and shoving the boy in the middle. Look at the clothes he's wearing, they're hideous. Even our house staff wouldn't wear that. Yeah, I heard his mom was a seller, who knows if he carries some dirty disease. He just looks so gloomy, makes me want to punch him. At that time, I didn't know about the illegitimate son in the Thorne family, nor did I know who that boy was. I just felt it was wrong for those boys to bully someone, so I stepped forward and stood in front of him. Whatever the adults did, what does it have to do with the child? It's not like he chose this. He might be poor now, but how do you know he won't soar high someday? There's an old saying, never bully a young person for being poor. You guys who don't study probably haven't even heard of it. The boys argued with me for a bit, but I eventually retorted and shut them all down. When only Sebastian remained, he mumbled a quiet thank you to me. And I, looking nonchalant, told him, I just like to help people out when I see injustice. Don't feel obligated. Chapter 16. Sebastian said that after that incident, I took root in his heart. But his status prevented him from making any improper advances, and besides, he knew I liked Julian, so he silently cherished those feelings. I thought just watching you be happy would be enough for me. But I never expected Julian wouldn't know how to cherish you. In that case, if I didn't step in and win you back, I wouldn't be much of a man. Sebastian grinned after saying this, but looking at his smiling face made me want to cry again. Seeing my eyes redden, he panicked slightly and finally said helplessly, If you cry again, I'm going to kiss you. Before he could move, I leaned forward and kissed him first. After a brief moment of shock, he quickly took control, returning the kiss passionately. Lost in the moment, I heard him whisper softly in my ear, Mel, I love you. I love you too, Sebastian. Chapter 17. After that day, our relationship grew even closer. When I met up with Chloe, she teased me with a smile. You can tell Sebastian is very capable. Look at you glowing. It's like you've been rejuvenated overnight. I laughed and playfully pinched her side, but suddenly felt a gaze on my back. Turning around, I was startled to find Julian standing there, having appeared unnoticed. Chloe noticed him too and immediately stood protectively in front of me, blocking his view. What do you want? Julian wasn't annoyed. He just looked at me and said calmly, Maybe you should give Sebastian a call? His words stunned me for a moment. Before leaving this morning, Sebastian had mentioned needing to go back to his family home for something, saying he'd be back for dinner. What did Julian mean by suddenly appearing and saying this? Perhaps seeing the confusion in my eyes, Julian smirked. Sebastian told grandfather he wants to marry you. It made grandfather so angry he was hospitalized. This time, grandfather isn't just confining him. He's also taking back all the company shares Sebastian holds. He's a penniless pauper now. Do you still choose him? I immediately took out my phone and called Sebastian, but the call went straight to voicemail. My face grew paler, and Chloe quickly reached out to support me. Mel. Julian also stepped forward, extending a hand towards me. Melody, it's not too late to turn back. Come back to me. You should know, for someone with Sebastian's background, getting to where he is today wasn't easy. Julian's words made me waver slightly. Yes, without me, Sebastian might have a better life. Then I looked back at Julian and smirked too. So what? The help the Thorne family can offer, my Ashford family can offer too. Besides, with his abilities, do you really think the Thorne family can still control him? Just as I finished speaking, Sebastian's voice came from behind me. Mel, I'm really happy to hear you say that. Chapter 18. Seeing Sebastian appear, the expression on Julian's face instantly cracked. How did you get out? Didn't grandfather confine you? Sebastian pouted disdainfully. I didn't want to leave before. You didn't really think I couldn't leave, did you, nephew? You should really get some exercise. Stop wallowing in romance and affairs all day. Julian was about to say more when his phone suddenly rang, persistently, just like on his wedding night. Sebastian kindly reminded him, You should probably answer that. See if your stepmother got drunk again or broke her leg. Oh, right, maybe she's worried the truth is out and you'll blame her, so she's planning to run away. What do you mean? Sebastian didn't elaborate. Julian, looking confused, answered the phone. He accidentally hit the speakerphone button, and Serafina's voice came through the receiver, audible to all of us. Julian, I want to leave. Can you help me figure something out? Chapter 19. Later, Sebastian told me the whole story. The things Serafina had told Julian were true in event, but her motives were fabricated. It was all consensual on her part. She willingly became Arthur Thorne SR's mistress to climb the social ladder, while simultaneously scheming to seduce Julian to marry into wealth. She knew from the start Julian's background wasn't simple. Real poor people don't wear shoes worth thousands of dollars to a part-time job. What she hadn't calculated was that Julian's mother, Eleanor, found out. Worse, the two men she targeted turned out to be father and son. Knowing that revealing this would leave her losing on both fronts, she had no choice but to follow Eleanor's demands, break up with Julian, and disappear without a trace. Eleanor Thorne had long given up hope on her husband. She just didn't want such a calculating woman to ruin her son. But she never foresaw her own early death due to illness, nor that just over a month after her passing, Serafina would boldly take her place. As for why she chose Arthur Thorne SR over Julian, it was obviously because Julian's father was more powerful and offered an easier path to success. After all, if she tried to be with Julian, she would never get past his father. Looking at Sebastian, he seemed somewhat like a stranger. Why did you investigate all this? To bring down the Thorne family, of course. This was just collateral damage. Sebastian still wore that playfully defiant mask, but his hands were trembling slightly. I gently stepped forward and hugged him. You've suffered so much all these years. Sebastian's mother had actually been deceived by Arthur Thorne SR. He promised to marry her, to give her legitimacy, and she waited. It wasn't until she discovered she didn't have long to live that she was forced to seek him out, only to find out it had all been a lie. Sebastian had every reason to hate the Thornes. The Thorne family fell quickly. Sebastian handed over all the evidence he had gathered over the years to the police. Additionally, he helped the Thornes make headlines one last time. Photos proving Serafina had been involved with both Arthur Thorne SR and Julian exploded online, going viral. The last time I saw news about Julian was in the crime section. He had apparently snapped and stabbed Serafina. Some said it was love turned to hate, that his mind was twisted because he couldn't have his stepmother. But I saw the full video. In it, he screamed at the top of his lungs. It's all because of your lies that I lost Melody. I pursed my lips, feeling only disgust. People like him never look for fault in themselves, but what did it matter to me anymore? All I needed to do now was live my own life well.